away from Vrindavana, herding the cows. Purport. Having described how Lord Krishna stole the garments of the young gopis, Sukadeva Goswami now begins introducing the description of Lord Krishna's blessings upon the wives of some ritualistic brahmanas. Text number 30. When the sun's heat became intense, Lord Krishna saw that the trees were acting as umbrellas by shading him, and thus he spoke as follows to his boyfriends. Text 31 and 32. Lord Krishna said, O Stoka Krishna and Amsu, O Sridama, Subala, and Arjuna, O Rishabha, Ojasvi, Deva Prastha, and Varudhava. Just see these greatly fortunate trees, whose lives are completely dedicated to the benefit of others. Even while tolerating the wind, rain, heat, and snow, they protect us from these elements. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Lord Krishna was preparing to bestow his mercy on the wives of the hard-hearted ritualistic brahmanas. And in these verses, the Lord indicates that even trees who are dedicated to the welfare of others are superior to brahmanas who are not. Certainly, the members of the Krishna consciousness movement should soberly study this point. Wow. Let me just read that again. Lord Krishna was preparing to bestow his mercy on the wives of the hard-hearted ritualistic brahmanas. His mercy on the wives of the hard-hearted ritualistic brahmanas. And in these verses, the Lord indicates that even trees who are dedicated to the welfare of others are superior to brahmanas who are not. Certainly, the members of the Krishna consciousness movement should soberly study this point. Wow.
Wow.
Very interesting. Text 33. Just see how these trees are maintaining every living entity. Their birth is successful. Their behavior is just like that of great personalities. For anyone who asks anything from a tree never goes away disappointed. Purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This translation is quoted from Srila Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 9.46. Text 34. These trees fulfill one's desires with their leaves, flowers, and fruits, their shade, roots, bark, and wood, and also with their fragrance, sap, ashes, pulp, and shoots. Text 35. It is the duty of every living entity. It is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This translation is quoted from Srila Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 9.42. Text 36. Thus, moving among the trees whose branches were bent low by their abundance of twigs, fruits, flowers, and leaves, Lord Krishna came to the Yamuna River. Text 37. The cowherd boys let the cows drink the clear, cool, and wholesome water of the Yamuna. O King Parikshit. The cowherd boys themselves also drank that sweet water to their full satisfaction. Okay. Text 38. Then, O king, the cowherd boys began herding the animals in a leisurely way within a small forest along the Yamuna. But soon they became afflicted by hunger, and approaching Krishna and Balaram spoke as follows. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Jiva Goswami explains that the cowherd boys were concerned that Krishna would be would be hungry, and thus they feigned their own hunger so that Krishna and Balaram would make suitable arrangements to eat. So when it says feigned, meaning they uh, uh, they acted as if they were very hungry. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 22nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Krishna Steals the Garments of the Unmarried Gopis. Jai, all glories to Prabhupada. Okay, so now we go to chapter 23. The Brahmana's wives blessed. This chapter describes how Lord Sri Krishna, after inducing the cowherd boys to beg for food, showed mercy to the wives of some Brahmanas, performing a sacrifice, and made the Brahmanas themselves feel remorse. When the cowherd boys became very hungry, they asked Sri Krishna about obtaining food, and he sent them to beg some from a group of Brahmanas who were performing a sacrifice nearby. But these Brahmanas ignored the boys, thinking Sri Krishna an ordinary human being. The boys returned disappointed, but the Lord sent them off again, advising them to ask the Brahmanas' wives for the food. These ladies had heard of Krishna's transcendental qualities and were very much attached to him. Thus, as soon as they learned he was nearby, they went to him in great haste, bringing all four varieties of food. In this way, they offered themselves to Sri Krishna. Krishna told the women that while one can develop transcendental love for him by seeing his deity form in the temple, meditating upon him, and chanting his glories, one cannot achieve this result simply by being in his physical presence. He advised them that since they were housewives, their particular duty was to help their husbands perform sacrifices. He therefore instructed them to return to their homes. When the ladies went back home, their Brahmana husbands at once felt remorse, and they lamented. Quote, for anyone inimical to Krishna, his three births, seminal, brahminical, and sacrificial, are all condemned. On the other hand, these wonderful womenfolk who have not undergone the purificatory processes of the Brahminical class or performed any austerity or pious rituals have, through the devotion for Krishna, easily cut off the bondage of death. Well, since Lord Krishna, every desire is since Lord Krishna's every desire is completely fulfilled, his begging for food was simply an act of mercy toward us Brahmins. All the fruits of Vedic sacrifice, and indeed all things on earth, are his opulences. Yet, out of ignorance, we could not appreciate this fact. Having spoken thus, all the Brahmanas offered their obeisances to Lord Sri Krishna, hoping to counteract their offense. Nonetheless, out of fear of King Kamsa, they did not go to see the Lord in person. Okay, now this is chapter 23, the Brahmana's wives blessed, text number 1. The cowherd voice said, O Rama, Rama, mighty armed one, O Krishna, chastiser of the wicked, we are being harassed by hunger, and you should do something about it. Oh, well, that makes sense. Purport. The cowherd voice jokingly implied that since Sri Krishna is the subduer of all bad things, the Lord should subdue their hunger by arranging for them to eat. In this statement by the cowherd boys, we observe the intimate, loving friendship they enjoyed with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 2. Sukadeva Goswami said, thus entreated by the cowherd boys, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the son of Devaki, replied as follows, desiring to please certain of his devotees who were Brahmana's wives. Text number 3. Lord Krishna said, please go to the sacrificial arena where a group of Brahmanas, learned in the Vedic injunction, are now performing the Angirasa sacrifice to gain promotion to heaven. Text number 4. When you go there, my dear cowherd boys, simply request some food. Declare to them the name of my elder brother, the Supreme Lord Balarama, and also my name, and explain that you have been sent by us. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna encouraged his boyfriends to request charity without being embarrassed. In case the boys felt they had no right to personally approach such respectable Brahmanas, the Lord told them to mention the names of Balarama and Krishna, the holy names of God. Text 5. Thus, instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cowherd boys went there and submitted their request. They stood before the Brahmanas with palms joined in supplication and then fell flat on the ground to offer respect. Oh, that's good. Text 6. The cowherd boys said, O earthly gods, please hear us. We cowherd boys are executing the orders of Krishna. and we have been sent here by Balaram. We wish all good for you. Please acknowledge our arrival. Purport by His Divine Grace. You got this one, but the term Bhumi Deva, gods on earth, refers here to the Brahmanas, who are supposed to closely represent the will of the Supreme Lord. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness is not a primitive polytheistic doctrine holding that human beings on the earth are gods. Rather, it is a science that traces the descent of authority from the absolute truth himself, Sri Krishna. The authority and power of God naturally extend along with the extension of his creation. And on the earth, the Lord's will and authority are represented by purified, enlightened men called Brahmanas. This account will illustrate that the ritualistic Brahmanas approached by the cowherd boys were not at all properly enlightened and thus could not appreciate the position of Krishna and Balaram or that of their intimate associates. In fact, this pastime exposes the pretentious position of so-called Brahmanas, who are not faithful devotees of the Supreme Lord. Yeah, they don't want to serve the Lord. Text number 7. Lord Rama and Lord Achyuta are tending their cows not far from here. They are hungry and want you to give them some of your food. Therefore, O Brahmanas, O best of the knowers of religion, if you have faith, please give some food to them. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The cowherd boys doubted the generosity of the Brahmanas, and thus they used the word bhu bhu kshita, meaning that Krishna and Balarama were hungry. The boys expected the Brahmanas to know the Vedic injunction, Anasya Kshuditam Patram. Anyone who is hungry is a fit candidate for receiving food in charity. But if the Brahmanas would not recognize the authority of Krishna and Balarama, their title, Dvija, would be taken to mean merely born from two parents. Dvi means from, two, and then Ja, born, rather than twice born. When the Brahmanas did not respond to the cowherd boys' initial request, the boys addressed the Brahmanas with a slight trace of sarcasm as Dharma Vitama, O best of the knowers of religion. Text number 8. Except during the interval between the initiation of the performer of a sacrifice and the actual sacrifice of the animal. O most pure Brahmanas, it is not contaminating for even the initiated to partake of food, at least in sacrifices other than the Sutra Mani. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The cowherd boys anticipated the possible objection from the Brahmanas that they couldn't give the boys any food because they themselves had not yet eaten. and that a priest initiated to perform a sacrifice should not eat. Therefore, the boys humbly informed the Brahmanas about various technicalities of ritualistic sacrifice. The cowherd boys were not unaware of the formalities of Vedic culture, but their real intention was simply to render loving service to Lord Krishna. Text number 9. The Brahmanas heard this supplication from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yet they refused to pay heed. Indeed, they were full of petty desires and entangled in elaborate rituals. Though presuming themselves advanced in Vedic learning, they were actually inexperienced fools. There's a lot of people like that. A lot of brahmanas like that. Purport. These childish brahmanas were full of petty desires, such as the desire to attain to material heaven, and therefore they could not recognize the golden transcendental opportunity offered them by the arrival of Krishna's personal boyfriends. Presently, throughout the world, people are madly pursuing material advancement and thus cannot hear the message of the Supreme Lord Krishna that is being broadcast through the missionary activities of the Krishna consciousness movement. Times have hardly changed, and proud materialistic priests are still prevalent on the earth. Wow. Text 10 and 11. Although the ingredients of sacrificial performance, the place, time, particular paraphernalia, mantras, rituals, priests, fires, demigods, performer, offering, and as yet unseen beneficial results are all simply aspects of his, meaning Krishna's, opulences. The Brahmanas saw Lord Krishna as an ordinary human because of their perverted intelligence. They failed to recognize that he, meaning Krishna, is the supreme absolute truth, the directly manifest personality of Godhead, whom the material senses cannot ordinarily perceive. Thus bewildered by their false identification with the mortal body, they did not show him proper respect. That's a big mistake. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The ritualistic Brahmanas could not understand why the sacrificial food should be offered to Lord Krishna, whom they considered an ordinary human being. Just as a person with rose-colored glasses sees the entire world as rose-colored, a conditioned soul with mundane vision sees even God himself as mundane, and thus loses the opportunity to go back home, back to Godhead. That's a fact. Text 12. When the Brahmanas failed to reply even with a simple yes or no, O chastiser of the enemy, the cowherd boys returned disappointed to Krishna and Rama and reported this to them. Text 13. Hearing what had happened, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord of the universe, simply laughed. Then he again addressed the cowherd boys.
Yeah, 1 second, Marcus. Yes. Now tell me, Kaji. So you look for staff direct.
Showing them the way men act in this world. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. By laughing, Lord Krishna indicated the that they need not be angry at the ritualistic brahmanas, but should understand that one who begs refuse.
I'm also looking up Mataji. I'm also. Oh, okay.
Text 14. Lord Krishna said, tell the wives of the brahmanas that I have come here with Lord Sankarsana. They will certainly use all the food, for they are most affectionate toward me, and indeed, with their intelligence, reside in me alone. That's wonderful. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. While physically the wives of the Brahmanas remained at home, within their minds they resided in the Supreme Lord Krishna because of intense affection for him. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura explains that the reason Lord Krishna did not have the cowherd boys tell the Brahmana's wives he was hungry is that he knew this would severely distress these devoted ladies. Simply out of affection for Lord Krishna, however, the wives would be happy to give all the food requested of them. They would not heed their husbands' prohibitions, since they resided within the Lord through their transcendental intelligence. Yeah, so their husbands were all big brahmanas, but they were big phonies. And their wives were many, many times greater than their husbands, who were basically afraid of Kamsa. Therefore, they couldn't actually do anything to serve Krishna. But their wives were fully dedicated to Krishna. So let's see what they're going to say here. Text 15. Text 15. The cowherd boys then went to the house where the Brahmana's wives were staying. There the boys saw those chaste ladies sitting, nicely decorated with fine ornaments, bowing down to the Brahmana ladies. The boys addressed them in all humility. Text 16. The cowherd boys said, obeisances unto you, O wives of the learned Brahmanas. Kindly hear our words. We have been sent here by Lord Krishna, who is passing by not far from here. Text 17. He has come a long way with the cowherd boys and Lord Balaram, tending the cows. Now he is hungry, so some food should be given for him and his companions. Text 18. The wives of the Brahmanas were always eager to see Krishna, for their minds had been enchanted by descriptions of him. Thus, as soon as they heard that he had come, they became very excited. Not so their husbands. Text 19. Taking along a large and taking along in large vessels the four kinds of foods, full of fine tastes and aromas, all the ladies went forth to meet their beloved, meaning Krishna, just as rivers flow toward the sea. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura explains that the wives of the Brahmanas experienced conjugal feelings toward Krishna as if he were their paramour. Thus, they could not be checked as they rushed to see him. Text 20 and 21. Although their husbands, brothers, sons, and other relatives tried to forbid them from going, their hope of seeing Krishna, cultivated by extensive hearing of his transcendental qualities, won out. Along the river Yamuna, within a garden decorated with the buds of Ashoka trees, they caught sight of him, meaning Krishna, strolling along in the company of the cowherd boys and his elder brother Balarama. Text 22. His complexion was dark blue and his garment golden, wearing a peacock feather, colored minerals, strings of flower buds, and a garland of forest flowers and leaves. He was dressed just like a dramatic dancer. He rested one hand upon the shoulder of a friend, and with the other twirled a lotus flower. Lilies graced his ears, his hair hung down over his cheeks, and his lotus-like face was smiling. Text 23. O ruler of men, for a long time, those Brahmana ladies had heard about Krishna, their beloved, and his glories had become the constant ornaments of their ears. Indeed, their minds were always absorbed in him. Through the apertures, meaning holes, of their eyes, they now forced him to enter within their hearts. And then they embraced him within for a long time. In this way, they finally gave up the pain of separation from him, just as sages give up the anxiety of false ego by embracing their innermost consciousness. Text 24. Lord Krishna, who witnesses the thoughts of all creatures, understood how those ladies had abandoned all worldly hopes and come there simply to see him, meaning Krishna. Thus he addressed them as follows with a smile upon his face. Text 25. Lord Krishna said, "Welcome, O most fortunate ladies. Please sit down and make yourselves comfortable. What can I do for you? That you have come here to see me is most appropriate." Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Just as Sri Krishna welcomed the gopis who came to dance with him at night, he similarly welcomed the Brahmana's wives, whose pure love for him was proved by their overcoming many hindrances to see the Lord. The word upanam indicates that although these ladies had rejected their husbands' orders, their behavior was not at all inappropriate, since their husbands had obviously tried to obstruct their loving service to Lord Krishna. Text 26. Certainly, expert personalities who can see their own true interests render unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service directly unto me, meaning Krishna, for I am most dear to the soul. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord informed the Brahmanas' wives that not only they, but all people who recognize their true self-interest take to the spiritual progress of loving service to the Lord. Lord Krishna is Atma Priya, the real object of love for everyone. Although each individual has his own taste and freedom, ultimately every living being is a spiritual spark of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, everyone's primary loving attraction is constitutionally meant for Lord Sri Krishna. Loving service to the Lord should be the ahituki, without personal motive, and avyavahita, unobstructed by mental speculation, selfish desire, or any quirk of time and circumstance. Wow. Text 27. It is only by contact with the self that one's vital breath, intelligence, mind, friends, body, wife, children, wealth, and so on are dear. Therefore, what object can possibly be more dear than one's own self? Purport by Srila Prabhupada, the word yat samparkat in this verse refers to contact with the individual self and ultimately with the Supreme Self, the Lord, who is the origin of the individual living being. By developing Krishna consciousness, one automatically becomes self-realized, and thus one's vital strength, intelligence, mind, relatives, body, family, and wealth all become enhanced and brilliant by the central influence of Krishna consciousness. This happens because Krishna consciousness is the optimum efficient conjunction of the individual self, who is pure consciousness, with the Supreme Self and the Supreme Consciousness, Krishna. Text 28. You should thus return to the sacrificial arena, because your husbands, the learned Brahmanas, are householders and need your assistance to finish their respective sacrifices. Text 29. The wives don't like this. The wives of the Brahmanas replied, O Almighty One, please do not speak such cruel words. Rather, you should fulfill your promise that you always reciprocate with your devotees in kind. Now that we have attained your lotus feet, we simply wish to remain here in the forest so we may carry upon our heads the garlands of tulsi leaves. You may neglectfully kick away with your lotus feet. We are ready to give up all material relationships. Oh boy. Let's see who's going to win out. Purport. Here the Brahmanas' wives are saying something similar to what the gopis say at the beginning of the rasa dance. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.29.31. When Lord Sri Krishna tells them to go home as well. Like this verse, the gopis' statement begins with the words Maivan, Vibo Rihati Bhavan Gaditum Nri Sam Nigama refers to the Vedic literature, which states that one who surrenders at the lotus feet of the Lord does not return to the material world. Okay, that's important. Thus, the Brahmana's wives appeared to the Lord that since they had surrendered to him, it was unfair for him to order them to return to their materialistic husbands. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, Lord Krishna might have pointed out to the Brahmana's wives, "You young ladies are members of the aristocratic Brahmana community. So how can you surrender at the feet of a mere cowherd boy?" To this, the ladies might have replied, "Since we have already surrendered at your lotus feet, and since we desire to become your servants, we are obviously not maintaining a false identification as members of the so-called Brahmana community. You can easily ascertain this from our words." Lord Krishna might have replied, "I am a cowherd boy, and my proper maid servants and girlfriends are the cowherd girls, the gopis." The wives might have answered, "True, let them be so. Let them shine forth if you are embarrassed in front of your relatives to make Brahmana ladies your maidservants. We certainly don't want to embarrass you. We will not go to your village, but will rather remain in Vrindavan. Like presiding deities of the forest, we simply desire to perfect our lives by even the slight trace of current connection with you." Thus, by the spiritual insight of Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, we learn that the Brahmana's wives offered to remain at a distance and simply take the tulsi leaves that would fall from the lotus feet of Krishna or be crushed by the feet of his girlfriends when he would embrace them. The ladies offered to carry their tulsi leaves upon their heads, thus renouncing the desire to become Krishna's intimate girlfriends or maidservants, a position they knew was difficult to achieve. The young Brahma ladies begged to remain in Vrindavana forest. If the Lord had then asked them, "Then what will your family members say?" they would have replied, "We have already transcended our so-called relatives because we are seeing you, the Supreme Lord, face to face." Text 30. Our husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, other relatives, and friends will no longer take us back. And how could anyone else be willing to give us shelter? Therefore, since we have thrown ourselves at your lotus feet and have no other destination, please, O chastiser of enemies, grant our desire. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur comments as follows. From their very youth, the Brahmana's wives had heard about Lord Krishna, about Lord Krishna's beauty, qualities, and sweetness from the womenfolk of Vrindavana village, and also from the flower ladies the betel nut sellers, and others. Consequently, they always felt ecstatic love for Krishna and were indifferent to their household duties. Their husbands, seeing them as deviant, doubted them and avoided dealing with them as far as possible. Now the wives of the Brahmanas were ready to formally reject their so-called families and neighbors. And out of great agitation, they were crying and placing their heads upon Lord Krishna's lotus feet, offering obeisances. In this way, with choking voices, they spoke the above verse. They begged that the Lord Krishna bestow upon them the benediction that he be their only destination, that he, the chastiser of enemies, subdue all their enemies, those difficulties obstructing them from attaining the Lord. The wives of the Brahmanas simply wanted to serve Lord Krishna. And this is pure Krishna consciousness and ecstatic love of Godhead. Well, there it is. Yeah, the unique desire to serve Krishna by the ladies, the wives of the Brahmanas, is very, very special because they're not afraid of Kamsa. And they are not acting according to the fear of their husbands because they have ecstatic love for Krishna. Text 31. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, rest assured that your husbands will not be inimical toward you, nor will your fathers, brothers, sons, other relatives, or the general populace. I will personally advise them of the situation. Indeed, even the demigods will express their approval. Wow, that's the gold standard now. Text 32. For you to remain in my bodily association would certainly not please people in this world, nor would it be the best way for you to increase your love for me. Rather, you should fix your minds on me, and very soon you will achieve me. See, no, that's the correct way to completely surrender to Krishna and go back to Godhead quickly. Purport. The Lord pointed out that people in general would not appreciate a loving affair between Lord Krishna, who superficially was appearing as a cowherd boy, and the wives from the Brahmanas community. Also, the Brahmana ladies' own devotion and love would increase most efficiently in separation. In other words, it would be best all around if they continued to fix their minds on Lord Krishna and thus went on with their process they had been practicing throughout their lives. The Lord and his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, expertly engaged the Lord's devotees in different types of service so that all of them can quickly return to his lotus feet. Text 33. It is by hearing about me, seeing my deity form, meditating upon me, and chanting my names and glories that love for me develops. Honestly, that's wonderful. Not by physical proximity. Therefore, please go back to your homes. Let me read that again. It is by hearing about me, seeing my deity form, meditating upon me, and chanting my names and glories that love for me develops, not by physical proximity. Therefore, please go back to your homes. Text 34. Srila Sukadeva Goswami said, thus instructed, the wives of the Brahmanas returned to their place of sacrifice. The Brahmanas did not find any fault with their wives, and together with them, they finished the sacrifice. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The wives of the Brahmanas obeyed Lord Krishna's order and returned to the sacrificial arena of their husbands. Whereas the gopis, although ordered by Krishna to go home, remained in the forest to dance with him through the full moon night. Both the gopis and the Brahmanas' wives achieved pure love of God. Text 35. One of the ladies had been forcibly kept back by her husband. When she heard the others describe the Supreme Lord Krishna, she embraced him within her heart and gave up her material body, the basis of bondage to material activity. Purport. The lady described here was especially devoted to Lord Krishna. Upon giving up her material body, she immediately attained a spiritual body and left the sacrificial arena to join the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Harivilas. Text 36. Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, fed the cowherd boys with that food of 4 varieties. Then the all-powerful Lord Self partook of the preparations. Text 37. Thus the Supreme Lord, appearing like a human being to perform his pastimes, imitated the ways of human society. He enjoyed pleasing his cows, cowherd boyfriends, and cowherd girlfriends with his beauty, words, and actions. Text 38. The Brahmanas then came to their senses and began to feel great remorse. They thought, we have sinned, for we have denied the request of the 2 lords of the universe, who deceptively appeared as ordinary human beings. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Krishna and Lord Balarama did not try to deceive the Brahmanas. They straightforwardly requested food from them. Rather, the Brahmanas deceived themselves, as indicated by the Sanskrit word Nri Vidam Bayo, which means that Krishna and Balarama are bewildering for an ordinary human being who considers them also to be human. Still, Because the wives of the Brahmanas were great devotees of the Lord, the foolish Brahmanas received spiritual benefit and finally came to their senses. Oh, and that's good. That's very, very good. Text 39. Taking note of their wives' pure transcendental devotion for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and seeing their own lack of devotion, the Brahmanas felt most sorrowful and began to condemn themselves. That's what happens when you don't act properly. Text 40. The Brahmanas said, "To hell with our threefold birth, our vow of celibacy, and our extensive learning. To hell with our aristocratic background and our expertise in the rituals of sacrificial and rituals of sacrifice. These are all condemned because we were inimical to the transcendental personality of Godhead." You see, now they've come to their senses. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As explained in the definitions above, the words tri janma, or threefold birth, refer to 1, physical birth, 2, Brahminical initiation, and 3, initiation into the performance of Vedic sacrifice. Everything is useless if one is ignorant of the absolute truth and the Supreme Lord Krishna. Everything is useless if one is ignorant of the absolute truth, meaning Krishna, the Supreme Lord Krishna. Text 41. The illusory potency of the Supreme Lord certainly bewilders even the great mystics. What to speak of us? As Brahmanas, we are supposed to be the spiritual masters of all classes of men, yet we have been bewildered about our own real interest. Text 42. Just see the unlimited love these women have developed for the Lord Krishna, the spiritual master of the entire universe. This love has broken for them the very bonds of death, their attachment to family life. Purports by Srila Prabhupada. Superficially, the husbands, fathers-in-law, and so on were the ladies' gurus or teachers. Yet the women had become perfect in Krishna consciousness, whereas the men had fallen into the darkness of ignorance. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, upon returning home, the ladies showed transcendental ecstatic symptoms, such as trembling of the body, shedding of tears, standing of the bodily hairs on end, discoloration of the complexion, crying out, "Oh, please, oh, pleasure of my life, oh, Krishna," with faltering words and so forth. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti goes on to state that while one may object that it is not fitting for a woman to love anyone other than her husband, here the husbands themselves point out that they are gurus only in imitation, of the Supreme Lord, who is Jagat Guru, the universal teacher and spiritual master. The husbands noted that the women have perfected their transcendental attachment for Krishna, did not have even a trace of attachment left for home, husband, children, and so forth. Therefore, from that day on, the husbands accepted those ladies as their worshipful spiritual masters and no longer thought of them as their wives or property. Okay. Women live, women win. Text 43 and 44. And we'll end here. Uh, Second, one second. I say we're going to stop. Yeah, I think we'll stop there. That is text 43 and 44. So we'll start there tomorrow. And are there any questions or comments? What we have heard today? And our takeaway for today, let's talk about that. Here we see how the wives of the Brahmanas are more Krishna conscious than their husbands. And that's why here it says, Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti goes on to state that while one may object that it is not fitting for a woman to love anyone other than her husband, here the husbands themselves point out that they are gurus only in imitation of the Supreme Lord, who is Jagat Guru, the universal teacher and spiritual master. The husbands noted that the women, having perfected their transcendental attachment for Krishna, did not have even a trace of attachment left for home, husband, children, and so forth. Therefore, from that day on, the husbands accepted those ladies as their worshipable spiritual masters and no longer thought of them as their wives or property. You see, that is a major difference. Their wives manifested themselves as pure devotees of the Lord. And their husbands began to understand how the wives were completely free from any trace of attachment left for home, husband, children, and so forth. Therefore, from that day on, the husbands accepted these ladies as their worshipable spiritual masters and no longer thought of them as their wives or property. That is a huge realization. The husbands noted that the women, having perfected their transcendental attachment for Krishna, did not have even a trace of attachment left for home, husband, children, and so forth. Therefore, from that day on, the husbands accepted those ladies as their worshipable spiritual masters and no longer thought of them as their wives or property. Wow, it's huge, a huge statement. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are ending now on the end of text 42, and tomorrow we'll begin text 43 and 44. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions or comments? So this is very interesting. It says, therefore, from that day on, the husbands accepted those ladies as their worshipable spiritual masters and no longer thought of them as their wives or property.
Wow.
That's big. It's huge. The ladies, the wives are considering their husbands. The husbands are considering their wives to be worshipful spiritual masters and no longer thought of them as their wives or property. Wow. Okay. All glory to
Srila
Srila
Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai. Women have won.